time is running out. With Russia's aggression on the rise and the prospect of full-scale war with NATO growing larger than ever, the alliance needs to act now before it's too late. That's the message from Ukraine, which has issued a dramatic final warning to NATO member nations, urging them to up their game and even offering to train their armies in the art of drone warfare to prepare for a war with the Kremlin. It's easy to see why Ukraine is so concerned. It's felt the full force of the Russian military for over 3 years now. It suffered nightly drone and missile bombardments and witnessed the deaths of so many of its people, from innocent children taking shelter in their homes to brave soldiers fighting on the front lines. It's seen its buildings and infrastructure damaged and destroyed, and it's had to learn and adapt quickly to a changing battlefield dynamic in order to survive as long as it has. Ukraine has seen what Russia is capable of, and it's worried that the rest of Europe may not be ready to deal with that. And Russia certainly doesn't seem willing to wait around and give its enemies time to organize their air defenses and strengthen their forces. In fact, it seems to be edging ever closer to an all-out war with NATO with every passing day, as evidenced by its recent actions. On September 10, Russia launched more than 400 drones of various varieties, along with several dozen cruise and ballistic missiles into Ukraine. Many were taken down by Ukrainian air defenses, while others unfortunately hit their targets, leaving one person killed and several injured. Approximately 19 drones, however, continued on past Ukraine and into Poland, at which point the Polish Air Force, together with support from NATO allies, scrambled jets and brought some of the drones down. It was an unprecedented incident, the first time that any NATO nation had felt compelled to take military action against Russian assets in its own airspace. World leaders were quick to condemn Russia's actions, but the Kremlin followed up with yet more provocation just a few days later, when Romania became the second NATO nation in the span of a week to report a Russian drone crossing its borders. This time, it was only one drone, and Romania's defense ministry noted that it did not travel over any populated areas or appear to pose any threat to local people. But it was still a worrying sign, another example of Russia poking and prodding at NATO's boundaries to see what sort of reaction it might get. It pushed things even further when it shared a video online showing Iskander missile launchers positioned precariously close to the Polish border, allegedly as part of Russia and Belarus's Zapad 2025 joint military exercises. If fired from that location, these missiles had the capacity to strike targets all over Europe, including numerous capital cities, large parts of Poland and the Baltic states, and even sections of Sweden and Germany too. In the past, Russia has seemingly got away with some of these sorts of tactics, but in the light of recent events, NATO has taken a more active stance. First, Poland made the big step of invoking Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty, with Donald Tusk, the Polish Prime Minister, announcing, "The shooting down of drones threatening our security is a success for Polish and NATO forces, which simultaneously changes the political situation. In this regard, Allied consultations have taken the form of a formal request to activate Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty." Article 4 does not get activated often. In fact, this is just the 8th time since the North Atlantic Treaty was signed in 1949 that something like this has happened, which shows just how serious it is. After NATO discussions, the alliance announced Operation Eastern Sentry, a new initiative aimed at strengthening NATO's eastern flank, with numerous allies like France, Denmark and Germany immediately contributing fighter jets for the cause, and other countries like the United Kingdom pledging their commitment too. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte explained the importance of this initiative.
Whilst this was the largest concentration of violations of NATO airspace that we have seen, what happened on Wednesday was not an isolated incident. Russia's recklessness in the air along our eastern flank is increasing in frequency. We have seen drones violate our airspace in Romania, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. Whether intentional or not, it is dangerous and unacceptable. Allies expressed full solidarity with Poland and denounced Russia's reckless behavior. We have air defenses, ground, sea and air-based systems. Here too, with contributions from allies across Europe and North America working together every day. to ensure that we are prepared and ready to defend every inch of Allied territory. We stood up Baltic Sentry at the beginning of this year to help safeguard critical infrastructure from reckless behavior in the Baltic Sea. And today, General Ginkovic and I are here to announce that NATO is launching Eastern Sentry to bolster our posture even further along our eastern flank.
It's a significant step, and it's encouraging to see NATO nations taking Russia's action seriously, not letting the Kremlin continue to get away with one provocation after another. At the same time, military commanders and other experts in Ukraine are worried that the alliance isn't still doing enough to prepare itself for a potential upcoming conflict with Russia. More specifically, they're concerned that many European nations are simply not ready to cope with the intense and aggressive drone attacks that Russia could subject them to. And Ukraine is definitely an expert as far as drone warfare is concerned. For a very long time now, it's had to deal with sizable drone swarms soaring across its skies almost every single night. In the past, the swarms numbered just a few dozen drones. These days, there are hundreds of them, and the numbers regularly rise as Russia sets and breaks its own records with increasingly large and destructive strikes. Indeed, mere days ago, on September 7, Russia set another record, launching more than 800 Shahed-type drones into Ukraine, as well as over a dozen cruise and ballistic missiles towards targets all across the country. It was a devastating strike, with at least 5 people killed and 44 others injured. 2 of the casualties were a new mother and her infant child, who were killed in the Ukrainian capital Kyiv, and numerous buildings were damaged, including residential homes and other pieces of civilian infrastructure, with fires breaking out and explosions ringing around the city, as well as in other areas like Odessa, Zaporizhia and Poltava. Despite the terrible loss of life and damage, Ukraine was still able to bring down the vast majority of the drones. And this is not a one-off. Ukraine now regularly sees hundreds of Russian drones buzzing through its nighttime skies, and it brings down almost all of them time after time, night after night. It does this through a combination of tactics and tools, including advanced air defense systems provided by allies around the world, as well as its own domestic defenses, electronic warfare systems, interceptor drones and missiles, and other innovations. Ukraine gives these weapons and technologies to its mobile fire groups, which are essentially specialized air defense units tasked with taking down as many drones as they can. They're armed with heavy machine guns, anti-aircraft cannons, and man-portable air defense systems, or MANPADs, mounted on mobile platforms like pickup trucks. This allows them to quickly and efficiently travel around from place to place, backed up by aircraft, helicopters, drones, and other systems, all operating as part of a single holistic air defense network under the control of regional and Air Force commanders. This was thoroughly explained by Colonel Yuri Idnat, head of the communications department of the Ukrainian Air Force. You cannot account for everything when the enemy attacks with new systems. You have to try, experiment, and use innovative tools. Today, mobile fire groups are equipped with every possible gadget, from thermal imagers to optical and laser sights. Idnat went on to highlight how Ukraine's system is comprised of numerous elements, but all linked together to maximize efficiency and effectiveness. Airplanes, helicopters, mobile fire, small air defense, interceptor drones, electronic warfare means. The entire air defense system is controlled by the commander of the air forces, commanders of air commands in their areas of responsibility. All this works as a single system. Now, the reason Ukraine has managed to master drone warfare and defenses so completely is simply out of necessity. It had no other choice. Facing such intense and heavy aerial strikes on a consistent and recurring basis, it had to find ways to defend itself, and that's exactly what it's done. It's paid for its knowledge in flesh and blood, as countless lives have tragically been lost while Ukraine figured out the strategies and tactics it needed to use to fend off Russia's drones and minimize the impact of each attack. The drones still come and the swarms are getting bigger, but the Ukrainian armed forces have learned how to deal with them. Other countries, despite potentially having stronger economies and bigger military budgets than Ukraine, have not been in that same situation. They've had the freedom and leisure of being able to spend time and resources developing new weapons, crafting fancy tanks and fighter jets, or thinking up new radars and aerial defense systems of their own to show off at military expos and events. but they haven't actually had to deal with the real impact of hundreds of drones honing in on their towns, cities and populations. Ukraine has, and that gives it a very particular perspective on this type of warfare and much more experience and expertise than any of its allies. That's why the country is increasingly concerned about its European neighbours' readiness to face the realities of drone swarms, and recent events like the drone incursion into Poland haven't exactly provided much cause for optimism. Poland is no slouch when it comes to military modernisation and preparedness. It's long feared the threat of Russian aggression and has taken numerous steps to strengthen its army. Earlier this year, it signed a $6 billion plus deal with South Korea to buy a large batch of K2 Black Panther tanks, which are some of the most technologically sophisticated, versatile and powerful tanks in existence today. South Korea has also pledged to deliver self-propelled howitzers, fighter jets and multiple rocket launchers to Poland as part of a larger arms package. Also, in 2025, Poland signed a local production K2PL contract under which 61 tanks will be built in Gliwice. Back in 2022, Warsaw also ordered over 300 US-made M1 Abrams tanks to replace the older German and Soviet tanks it had been using up to that point, dramatically modernizing its stocks of armor and bringing its offensive capabilities to whole new levels. Poland has also led the way in both Europe and NATO when it comes to defense spending. In 2022, it was spending approximately 2.7% of its gross domestic product, GDP, on defense. That figure rose to 4.2% in 2024 and is set to increase even further to 4.7% by the end of this year. That makes Poland the #1 defense spender in the NATO alliance in terms of expenditure in relation to GDP. And that money is not being wasted. Poland is putting it not just towards new tanks and other armour, but also major improvements across its air and sea forces too. It's phasing out old equipment and bringing in new, stronger gear, while also announcing plans for large-scale military training for all adult men in Poland to expand its reserve force. Poland has also invested heavily in new border defences along its eastern flank and has been scrambling jets on a nightly basis for some time now, just in case any Russian drones cross the border. Yet, despite all of those impressive improvements, when 19 drones entered Polish airspace, the country didn't exactly demonstrate the most efficient response. It scrambled F-16 fighter jets, and the Dutch government also sent F-35 fighters to the area. The Polish government also revealed it deployed Black Hawk helicopters along with Soviet-era Mi-24 and Mi-17 helicopters too. Together, these extremely expensive and advanced fighters reportedly took out just 4 of the drones, which were said to be very cheap and basic in their design. This is a worry because it suggests that Poland and other European nations are simply not ready to respond appropriately to the Russian drone threat. This was confirmed by Alexander Cooper, a former military commander and specialist in drone warfare, who said, "Firing $1 million missiles is not an economical model that can be sustained when it comes to facing off against drones that cost tens of thousands of dollars or less." Alexander Cooper also added that there are not enough aircraft within the NATO fleet, with enough missiles or enough interceptors to do the job. Experts also worry about putting fighters' pilots' lives at risk by deploying them against drone swarms, since it costs a lot of time and money to train pilots, and they're usually tasked with more traditional air defense roles, such as air policing or intercept missions, rather than being risked en masse against drones. In response, European commanders like Poland's General Wiesław Kukuła, Chief of the General Staff of the Polish Armed Forces, have stated that any action which saves lives is worth the cost. Kukuła stated, "What matters is the value of what this drone can destroy. If it's a Polish life, it has no price." That's a perfectly fair and honourable statement, but the fact is that there are evidently much more efficient and smarter ways to go about dealing with drone swarms than deploying fancy fighter jets and launching expensive missiles. Ukraine proves this almost every single day, and it's willing and eager to share its knowledge with its allies. Colonel Inat himself has made a formal offer to countries like Poland and others to share the unique and invaluable strategic insights that Ukraine has gained over the course of the war so far. Clearly, he feels that this knowledge could help NATO better prepare itself, so that the next time Russian drones enter the alliance's airspace, they'll be able to respond faster, smarter, and more effectively to take them out. As Inat notes, The type of missiles used to shoot them down is their business, but they don't have as much experience as Ukraine. He went on to discuss how the response in Romania was not particularly efficient. For over 40 minutes, 2 fighter jets couldn't do anything. They tried, but lost a lot of time. INAT has proposed training sessions in cities like Lviv in Ukraine or Krakow in Poland to help Polish, Romanian and other armed forces to discover better ways of dealing with Russia's Shahed kamikaze drones. And it's not just in terms of defense maneuvers and tactics that Ukraine could help to train and prepare its allies. It could also teach them how to use drones offensively too, to launch counterattacks or long-range strikes against its enemies. Again, this is a field of warfare that Ukraine has evidently mastered as the conflict has continued. This year alone, there have been many examples of Ukrainian armed forces carrying out successful strategic drone strikes against Russian targets. Operation Spiderweb was the most exciting example of this, which involved over 100 Ukrainian drones carefully concealed in the backs of trucks that were then driven out to air bases across Russia. The drones were released and rained down fire on Russian bomber planes and other assets, dealing literally billions of dollars of damage in a matter of minutes. There are so many other examples too, and more reports emerge all the time of Ukrainian drones crossing into occupied territories or even passing the border into Russia itself to take out radars, air defense systems, oil refineries, ammo storage facilities and more. Each attack is planned with precision and executed with care, and this is all the result of Ukraine's remarkable innovation and desperate need to not just defend its territory but to strike back against its aggressor. As the war has gone by, Ukraine has built an entire drone warfare ecosystem. It's created over 200 types of unmanned aerial vehicles, pioneered marine drones, and raised the benchmark of what drones can do on the battlefield. It has defense startups and major military production plants working around the clock to uncover new ways of making drones smarter, stealthier, and more destructive, and uses between 20 and 30 effective proven models to strike Russia on a regular basis. This is a system built on speed and efficiency, and those are two elements that NATO seems to lack in its existing operations. If Ukraine sees that something isn't working or wants to roll out a new drone model or upgrade, it can do so in weeks or even days. In a similar situation, NATO might spend months working on technologies and fine-tuning prototypes. And in real drone warfare situations, with hundreds of Russian Shaheds hitting each night, there isn't that sort of time. These are the kinds of lessons Ukraine can impart to its allies. It can show them how to defend themselves against drones, how to use drones offensively, and how to master drone warfare and build their own ecosystems that are dynamic, flexible, and scalable to suit changing conditions. Because the fact of the matter is that drones are an increasingly large part of modern warfare. Gone are the more traditional days of trenches and tanks. That's not to say that tanks and armour no longer matter, but as the Russia-Ukraine conflict continues to demonstrate, drones take up more space on the battlefield than ever. And without knowing drone warfare, there's little chance of surviving a head-to-head clash with the Kremlin's forces. European nations and NATO members would be wise to listen to Ukraine and take advantage of its incredible knowledge and experience in this domain. Ignoring or turning down the country's offer of educational aid and insight could prove a grave mistake, especially if Russia ramps up its aggression even further and sends more drones into places like Poland, Romania and the Baltics in the weeks ahead. Europe's air defences have to be as strong as possible if and when the time comes. Its responses have to be smarter and better coordinated, and it's only with Ukraine's help that can happen. Kyiv has already entered talks with several allies like Denmark, Norway and Germany to share the benefits of its knowledge, and other countries should certainly consider making similar arrangements before it's too late. Now, learn more about Russia's recent provocations in our video looking at the Iskander missile deployments in Kaliningrad. Or for a closer look at how the war is unfolding along the front lines, check out our breakdown of how Ukrainian forces cleverly lured the Russians into a death trap in Sumy. And finally, make sure to subscribe to our channel too, so you can stay in the know and up to date on everything that's happening in Ukraine and elsewhere.